Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Please welcome our main speaker tonight, Carolyn G.
Hi everybody, I'm Carolyn. I'm a very grateful recovered alcoholic. And thank you, Justin. Where are you? Thank you very much for asking me to come here tonight and share and participate in my recovery. Justin called me last night as well, and I said to him, "Oh, you know, I've got no plan. I have empty nest now. I've got all three of my children are out of the house, and as of last night, none of my children were in town. Well, this morning, 2 of them arrived, but it's okay because you know, what I get to do is you know, suit up and show up when asked today, and part of my gratitude in that is that I get to carry that message to my children as well. You know, we suit up and show up, and I remember years ago when Jan was sponsoring me, and we talked about, oh, I've got these plans, but somebody asked me to do this, and she said, well, let me just tell you this. We don't change our plans because something better comes along. You know, you make a commitment and you stick to it, and you know, you can do that other better thing another time. So I'm grateful to be here and to be sober. And don't let Darles fool you. She's a wonderful speaker, and she's very capable of being the main speaker, and I love listening to you. So anyway, this is a big old thing up here. I got to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. My last drunk was October 23rd, 1991. And I got to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, God, my life was crazy. Let's start from the beginning. I was raised in Texas, which doesn't make me an alcoholic. However, I was confused as a child. You know, I'm sure many of you have heard the phrase "good old boy," and they're supposed to be from Texas, you know. And the trouble is that, you know, I'd never seen any when I was a child. I was confused. There was a lot of talk about love, and you know, and then a few bottles of whiskey or a few cases of beer would be drank, and love turned into anger, and that's how my family dealt with a lot of their issues, was through anger and violence. So as a result of that, I grew up a very terrified little girl, terrified of people, and it wasn't until I got to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that I've been able to overcome the fear of you. You're not so bad after all. Anyway, as I said, I was raised in Texas, and I come from what I believe are a long line of drinkers, and we didn't talk about feelings, and we didn't cope very well with problems. What I saw in my life, the way people handled problems was through drinking, and that's how I learned to deal with my own, was through taking a drink. I didn't like the taste of alcohol very much. I think I had my first, well, we always drank. My parents always gave me beer or something, you know, as kids. That was the ha-ha. We watched the kids stumble around. It was funny. You know, we did that. But I had my first drunk, I think at probably about the age of 13. And I didn't really care much for the taste of alcohol. Yeah, it was horrible. But I managed to get enough alcohol down, and I loved the effect that alcohol had on me. When I drank enough alcohol, all those fears and inhibitions and the anger and all the stuff went away, and I was able to function relatively okay. Anyway, I lived in this family, as I said, of a lot of ragers and angry people, and a lot of things happened to a little girl that shouldn't happen to a little girl, and I turned my back on God very early on as a small child, believing that, that if there was a God, things like that wouldn't happen to little people. And it wasn't until I got to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that I had been confusing all my life God's will with man's will. And I'm really grateful to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous for allowing me to find a God of my understanding and build a relationship with Him. My family, I believe, did a geographic to California when I was just before I was 13, and I struggled really hard with losing the Southern draw because I didn't want to be called Tex, and I needed to be cool and all that stuff, and I sought out the people here that had what I know today are the same fears and resentments and all the stuff that we come to Alcoholics Anonymous with, and that's what we did. We drank and did outside issues so that I could function in my life. It was a long way from home to school, and we seemed to be sidetracked very often between home and school, and would often end up in the park, drinking Annie Green Springs or that kind of stuff. Those fruity kind of wines. And I would drink to get drunk, and I would throw up, and I'd get sick, and couldn't wait to do it again because I liked the effect. It didn't matter that all that happened afterward between the first drink and I could function. All the fear went away. All the things I was afraid of, I was no longer afraid of. I was afraid of people, and when I drank, I wasn't afraid of you. I could communicate, I could talk, I was prettier, taller, I could dance, I could do all that stuff better. Anything I couldn't do sober, I could do fabulous, as a drunk. So anyway, I did that for a lot of years. I did not complete high school. I became very incorrigible as a teenager. As I said, my mother was full of a lot of anger. My parents had divorced when I was 2. She had passed along all that anger towards my father to me. At age 16, I was sent to live with my father in Georgia as an incorrigible teenager, and that was disastrous. He had remarried, had a new family, and I was from California, and I was like in this armpit of the world, Georgia, outside of this little town outside of Athens, Georgia, and you couldn't. Everybody knew everybody. I couldn't even get mail. My father knew the postmaster, so all the mail was filtered, and I felt very isolated from my world here, and so there was a lot of anger there. And finally, after about 9 months, I was sent back to California because he couldn't deal with me. By that time, I'm 17, and I get back here and decide that I'm just going to do my life on my own. Thank you very much. So I got myself an apartment, I got myself a job, and it was working. And it was the perfect job. I waited tables. It was perfect. I didn't have to be at work until 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, which meant we could party all night, and I didn't have to be up before 4 the next day. It was perfect. And then I'd drink, and I'd work until 10 or 12, and then we'd drink until 6 or 8 in the morning, and I'd sleep till 4, and that was kind of the repetition for many, many years. And about the time I was 21, I was working with a girl, and she had invited me to Hollywood to listen to a friend of hers play in this rock and roll band, and would I like to come along? And I said, sure, it'd be great. And I had believed that happily ever after story, in some of those storybooks, that I read, happily ever after. She meets him, and happily ever after. And I think that's what I was seeking. Most of my life is happily ever after. What I know today is that it doesn't exist. And I met the guy. I met Prince Charming. He was 7 feet tall in platform shoes, dressed like a pirate, playing an electric violin with a rock and roll band. That was the guy. And, he said the words, and we took one another hostage, and, we did the rock and roll lifestyle for a few years, and it was a lot of fun. We had a good time. And then I became pregnant with our first child, and we decided to do the right thing, that we would get married and, build this family. So we did that, and the problem is that I brought into that relationship and into that marriage all that anger and hurt and resentment and fear and frustration and anxiety, and, I brought all that stuff to that marriage. I didn't know that at the time. I know it today, and so we got married, and life was pretty good for a few years, and but in that family and that happily ever after life that I had been seeking, apparently I had gotten. However, I didn't know what to do with it when I got it. So the more responsibilities that were placed on me, and what I've learned is that drinking wasn't my problem. Drinking was my answer. Whenever there was a problem or something I couldn't deal with, take a drink and it'd be okay. However, when you have family and a life and stuff going on, there tend to be problems. A lot of them. So the more I would drink, and the more I would drink, the more problems, and on and on and on. So my son is now 9 years old, and we had some friends of ours, and we had talked about building this family, and finally some friends of ours said, if you're waiting to get it together, you're never going to have more children, so why don't you just have the children, and then you'll, everything else will fall in place. So we had another child, and things are still, relatively okay. The drinking is increasing on both parts, and my life is beginning to spiral out of control. And 6 months later, I'm pregnant again with the third child. And my insanity at that time, as I made this very ridiculous statement to the doctor, like, you don't understand, I already have one of those. And he said, yeah, okay, well, you're going to have another one. So here I am, now I have this husband and this house and these kids, and I'm discovering that I don't really know what to do with them. And so the more I'm drinking and the more I'm drinking and the more I'm running from my family, and the things are escalating out of control, and my husband has gotten a job playing for the studios, playing soundtrack for films, and that one's going okay, except that he had a tendency to get in these. We lived in Venice, and people like to steal your cars in Venice, and we'd be up at 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and we'd catch these people trying to steal these cars, and he would take matters into his own hand, and he would show up for work and have to do things like duct tape his bow to his hand because it was busted in order to get through a session, and we thought that was normal. There's not another musician I know that's ever had to have their bow duct taped to their hand. Never met one yet. So, things are spiraling out of control. Things are becoming more unmanageable, and he's doing his best to show up at his job, and I'm trying to do my best to show up for these kids, and be a mother and a wife, and at this time I've got so many of them. I don't know. Somebody is always wanting something to eat, and I'm thinking, don't they know I just need a drink? And these kids are following me around the house, and they're, I go outside, and they seem to want to be out there with me, and I go inside, and they seem to want to be inside with me, and I can't get away from these little people. They're all around me. So so my life is spiraling, out of control, and it's becoming increasingly unmanageable. And I'm showing up at the musicians union, picking up my husband's checks and cashing the checks, and doing what I need to do to get through my day. And I'm not paying things like the mortgage, and I'm not paying things like property taxes, pretty important stuff. And things are getting out of control, more out of control. And my sister-in-law comes to visit, and she says to my husband she thinks that perhaps I have a, drug or maybe an alcohol problem. And we're married quite a few years by this time, and he says something really silly like, I'd know a thing like that. And they began to watch me a little bit closer, and it became increasingly harder to hide my activities. And a few months go by, and 3 o'clock in the morning, my purse is opened, and we realize where all the money's going. And I did a lot of house cleaning at 4 in the morning. But you need some stuff to do housework at 4 in the morning. That's not natural. So I was told, I was given an ultimatum. I needed to get it together or go, and I'm a runner. That's the easier, softer way for me. Give me an ultimatum, I'm out of here. So I packed up my little car, and I left home and left those 3 kids and that husband and that dog and the house and the laundry, and I was certain that a few days would go by and I'd be invited back. They'd realize how important I was. And that didn't happen. It didn't happen. My husband ended up in what he thought was an Al-Anon meeting to take care of, his problem, which was me. And it turned out to be a men's stag of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he got the message really quickly. He got the tough love especially quickly. And so he filed for a divorce. And that was fine with me. That was perfectly fine because he was my problem. It wasn't my alcoholism. It was him. And if I could just get rid of him and keep the house and, the kids and whatever money he had left, I'd be okay. And that didn't happen. I couldn't show up at court sober. And we had psychiatric evaluations and all that sort of stuff. And it got really ugly and nasty. And I ended up having to have child monitors with me in order to visit my children. And that was pretty demoralizing. How dare you people think I need a babysitter to be with my children? And so anyway, unfortunately, they were doing the right thing for my children and for me, and I didn't realize that at the time. And then that was in June, when I left the house in June. Left those little girls. The youngest was 4. They were 4 or 5, and I think Richard was 12 or something like that. And I left those kids. And on October 23rd, 1991, I was on my way. I had come back from Palm Springs, a very long, very, very long weekend. Oh, God, it was so long. And I had been drinking, what was I drinking? Wild turkey in the, in the airline size bottles all the way home from Palm Springs, and who knows what else. And I was supposed to have visitation with my children, and the best I could do is put a blanket on the front lawn and just have them sit with me. It wasn't about reading stories or, how was your week or your weekend or any of that. It's just could you just sit here with me and just be quiet? My husband came home, and it was apparent that I was in violation of visitation with my children, and the police were called, and my children were escorted out of the house while I was in handcuffs on the front lawn, and that was the end. I knew life as I knew it was over. It was done. I knew that I was going to be a weekend mother, that my husband was going to divorce me, and he was going to get custody of the children, and everything I had known was going to be gone. And I can't even remember what thoughts I was having that day, Probably not many. If I couldn't read, green eggs and ham to my 4-year-old, I probably couldn't put together coherent thought. So instead of going to jail that day, I went to Claire Detox and spent 10 days in their detox. My husband drove me there. He dropped me off. He gave me a kiss on the forehead. He said, good luck, you're going to need it. Don't call me. And I didn't. But I had a good friend who had gotten sober about 7 years before that. And he would show up at Claire, and he would bring me, candy bars and cigarettes and phone money. And I spent 10 days in Claire, and that was the first time I heard the message of Alcoholics Anonymous carried through, H&I panels there. I had tried to do a little outpatient thing through Kaiser, but, my husband was the problem, and, it wasn't me, and, just get off my back, and things are going to be okay. And I really didn't hear anything that they had to say when I was a part of that program, and I did when I was in Claire. And what I heard is that, I could have a different life if I wanted to. One of the counselors there at the time, Reuben, he was a fabulous Native American Indian, and really, I could tell he had been a really wild guy. And he said something to me one day, like, I knew, Carolyn, I'd always known there was a kind and loving man somewhere within me, and it's Alcoholics Anonymous that's allowed that person to come out. And I thought, that's it. That's it. And I know there's a kind and loving person in here somewhere. I know she exists, and and if you can help me do that, that's what I wanted when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I spent 10 days in Claire, at 17 days sober. I got out of there, and I was renting a room in a house with some people who were still doing, what we do. And at 17 days sober, 6:45 in the morning, I was here at the Marina Center, and I met a young woman who was a resident of Felicity House, a sober living on the west side of town. And she had informed me that one of the residents had drank the night before, and there was available bed if I wanted to go over and check it out. And I did that. I interviewed for the bed, and I just told the director that I was sure in 30 days my life would be great, and I'd be moving right along. And she gave me a nice pat on the leg and told me how sweet that was. And then she asked me, a trick question. She asked me where I was going to go, and I didn't have an answer. So she very graciously gave me, she saved my dignity, and she said, why don't you stay here with us for 90 days, and we'll reevaluate after 90 days. And I did that, and 90 days turned into a year and a week. So much for that 30-day business. And I did the things you asked me to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's, get a sponsor, work the steps, show up at meetings, show up at my job, show up for those. Eventually, I was able to work out of the monitored visitation with my children, show up for them when I said I was going to show up for them, and, just do the deal that we're asked to do here. And I did that, to the best of my ability. My husband and I dated as a resident of Felicity House. I'd been married to this man, 15 years or something, and we were dating with an 11:30 curfew. And, looking back on it, it was really a lot of fun. But, we did that dance of death, 1 month ago, how things go. I'm crazy, I'm nuts. And, it takes a little while to, to find a new way of life here in Alcoholics Anonymous and to change some old behavior. And I suited up and showed up and did the things necessary. And after I took a year cake, probably here at the Marina Center, I spent every Monday night here at the Marina Center for that year. It was part of my commitment to be here. And after that year, I was invited to come back and be a mother and a wife to that same husband and those same 3 kids. And, they were still wanted to eat, and there were still piles of dirty laundry and all that stuff. But I had learned here in Alcoholics Anonymous how to be of service, in and out of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And And so my mantras were not that any longer that I had to do the laundry. Thank you, God, I get to do the laundry. You know, I don't have to feed those children. I get to feed those children today. And as I said, you know, now those children are 18. I shall be 19 next month. 19, 20, and 28 years old. You know, and I was able to be a mother to those children and get them through school and show up for the softball games and show up for the volleyball games and show up for the PTA. I am not a PTA kind of girl. You know, I like to throw back some vodka and get drunk. And so I'd show up for PTA meetings and, you know, I'd be room mother. All that stuff that I thought was so bloody boring. You know, and what it turned out to be was really a lot of fun. You know, and it got to be very rewarding, fulfilling, and I got to do those things for my children that I had never seen anybody in my family do. I'd never seen anybody show up for it like that, you know, one day at a time, week after week, month after month, year after year. You know, I'd never seen that before, and it's the women in Alcoholics Anonymous who taught me how to do that. And you just suit up and show up, and because my thing, you know, I'm really afraid of people, and I don't know, you know, I'm not educated, and I don't know how to do anything. And you told me, sure you do, just show up. There'll be something for you to do. You know, you don't have to be PTA president, but you can show up and, you know, you can make coffee, you can bake cookies, you can do cakes, you can do fundraisers, you know, you can do, there's a lot of different things you can do. So just show up, and I did that. And I was able to do those kind of things. And my daughter started playing softball, and they asked me to be in charge of the snack bar. They asked me to be in charge of money, and there was a lot of problem with money when I got sober. You know, that asked my girls when they were little, you know, when they were asked, you know, what's the problem? We got a little problem at the bank. There was a little problem at the bank. And I'm really grateful to say that I haven't had a problem at the bank since I've been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, and I'm grateful for that. So, you know, I got to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, powerless over alcohol, and my life had become unmanageable. And what I've gotten here is new power. And because I have new power, there has been some kind of manageability brought back into my life. The step reads had become. If it had become that, maybe it can become something else. It only took me 7 years to figure that one out. It took me 7 years to figure that one out because I'd heard we're powerless, and yes, I'm powerless over alcohol. And but because you taught me it's the first drink and not the 20th that gets me drunk, you know, I was given the power of choice back. I'd lost the power of choice and drink. You know, if there's a problem, we drink. If things are good, you drink. If, you know, whatever the problem was, you know, we drink. And the first step gave me back the power of choice. You taught me the first drink gets you drunk. Don't take the first drink no matter what. So I haven't taken the first drink no matter what, you know, since, you know, October 23rd, 1991. And as a result of that, I've managed to pay the mortgage. I managed to pay the phone bill. I managed to pay the property taxes. I've managed to feed those children. I've managed to, you know, be a wife to that husband most days. And, you know, I managed to do an awful lot when I stay away from the drink. You know, it's when I take the drink that, you know, all the things that are priority are no longer priorities. All the things that are important are no longer important. The only important thing is to drink. So I was given back the power of choice, and lack of power was my dilemma when I got here, and through the power of the 12 steps, the God of my understanding that I've gotten here, and the principles of the 12 steps, and fabulous sponsorship, I've got lots of power. I've got lots of power, and it wasn't until I was 7 years sober that somebody finally pointed that out to me, because I was up against the wall at 7 years sober, and I can't do this. I can't do my life anymore. And she said. And I was all emotional, and every time I'd read about God or talk about God, I'd fall apart. And she asked me the question, why is this God thing so impossible for you? And I don't know what's going. She said, well, for God's sake, you've been praying for the knowledge of God's will for 7 years. What you don't know is that you've been given the power. It says, and the power to carry it out, not just God's knowledge. And I had been so afraid. See, I don't know about you, but I'm just as fearful of success as I am failure. If I find out I can do it, oh no, you're going to expect me to keep doing it. Right? You're going to expect me, to keep doing it. I said, I made the statement to my sponsor that currently I have, and I said to her one day, I'm just an alcoholic. What do you expect? And she said, I'm so glad you asked that question. She said, what I expect of you is to be a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous and practice the principles of the 12 steps. That's what I expect of you. And I thought, oh my God, I'm in a lot of trouble with this lady. And the truth is that I'm not in trouble at all. What she's given me is, the knowledge that I have the power through the 12 steps to live my life one day at a time, no matter what happens. That we recover from hopeless and helpless. I haven't recovered from my alcoholism. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. If I take a drink today, who knows? I don't know if I'm going to go home to that husband or if I'm going to end up in Mexico. Oh, I don't know what's going to happen if I take that first drink. But I've been given the power to live my life. I've recovered from helpless and hopeless. Somewhere, someplace, somebody has an answer to all my problems. It's my business to ask the question. It's my business to say, I don't know, can you help me? And it's amazing. People will say, oh, yeah, I know how to deal with that. Or no, I know how to deal with that. Or yes, I've experienced that, and this is what I did, and it was successful. And my thinking was, my insane thinking was that, if I make a choice, then I must make that choice work no matter what. Come hell or high water. What does Otto say? He says, where there's practice makes perfect, never in my life. And if there was a will, my will doesn't bring away, it brings chaos and confusion. So I give it up. I don't know how to do it. But I used to make choices believing that no matter what the result was of that choice, good or bad, that I must do whatever it took, whatever amount of chaos it took to make it appear as though that was right in my mind. That's what I was going to do. I was constantly fighting and working and manipulating and shaking and moving and grooving and trying to convince you or talk you into something. It was crazy. And now I know today that if I make a choice and it doesn't work out the way I think the way it can work out or should work out or want it to work out, then I can make another choice. Another choice. That didn't work. Let's try it another way and see what happens. And that's been my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, is that I don't necessarily know what it is I want until I figure out what it is I don't want. Okay, I don't want that. So let me do it this way. And I've asked the questions and sought out the answers, somewhere. So I've been given that power and, turning my will in my life. I told you I turned my back on God as a small child. And I came here to learn that, I'd been confusing God's will with man's will most of my life. That, those things that happened to me were not God's will. Those were sick people. And, my childhood, I thought I was robbed of a childhood. And what I realized here in Alcoholics Anonymous is that, a lot of bad things, but a lot of good. I didn't remember the good things that happened. There was a lot of good things that happened to me as a kid, too. And, my mother wasn't perfect, but she did some things right, too. And they told me in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to see where religious people were right. And all my life I had been only looking to see where they were wrong. I'd never even challenged myself to see where a spirituality or something could be right. Those are just weak-minded people. And they all needed a good drink. And, I found out that, people of faith have logic. And, I hadn't lived a logical day in my life. So, people of faith, it's given faith and direction to millions of people. So who am I to say, that this stuff doesn't can't work for them. You know, I was being just as judgmental as they were, I thought. You know. So I found a God of my understanding, my own understanding here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I fired the God of my childhood. And I wrote myself a want-ad to for the kind of God I wanted. And that was loving, forgiving, and, just a loving, forgiving God. And I've got that in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've gotten that through, you people, because God is within all of you. And you've loved and accepted me for just exactly who I am here, and I'm really grateful for that. I haven't, certainly haven't gotten perfect, and I told you I was a runner. And what I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is that when I act out badly or I do things that are inappropriate, the wonderful gift I've gotten here in Alcoholics Anonymous is that I don't have to run away. I don't have to run away. I can acknowledge that, I'm fallible and human, and make my apologies, and I can still take my rightful place in society. I get to take my rightful place here. Because the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has given me purpose. I've looked for purpose my whole life. And I found it in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous with a bunch of drunks like you. And that's to stay sober and help another one of you achieve sobriety and to be of maximum service to God and my fellows, wherever that takes me. And, God, who knew that could bring you joy and happiness? I thought that was going to mean, who knew showing up and being of service to the PTA was going to bring me any kind of joy? But it did. It brought me joy. And who knew that, opening up that laundry chute from the upstairs, we've got this magic door in the wall. My kids call it the magic door. You throw it in dirty, it comes back clean and folded. They're a little spoiled. But, I really felt that, that's what I needed to do. I needed to do that for me. People would say, oh, they're old enough to do their own laundry. Yeah, but, I know that's the things that I needed to do for me to be of service to that family and to make those living amends to them. And so anyway, what I recognized in that inventory that, that it wasn't about you. I was the perfect victim. I was a victim of my life. I was a victim of people. I was a victim of circumstances. And what I learned is that there are no victims, only volunteers. That that the most of the time, people don't do it to you unless you let them. And I let most of the stuff I let happen in my life. I learned how to say the word no here. It's great. I love the word no. Oftentimes my husband would leave the house and he'd call me on the cell phone and say, and by the way, I need you to do blah, 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 blah. And I'd say, no, I'm sorry, my plate is way too full. And if it's really important to you, you're going to have to do it yourself. Because I learned in Felicity House when I kept asking those questions, I kept asking of him the things that he wasn't capable of giving me. And what the director said to me, Carolyn, if you keep going to him and asking him the questions and he keeps saying no, why do you keep going back? Hello? So what I learned is that if something was important to me, if I needed my children to be somewhere, if I needed to be committed somewhere, then it must be something that I'm willing to show up for, not expect somebody else to do it. So I do that. I take on my own responsibilities. I am responsible for my actions today. I am responsible to, in and out of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Do those amends. You do your best to do those amends. And I went to that mother and father-in-law who had helped my husband and I, bailed us out many, 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 many times in our drinking, and was willing to do what needed to be done to make that one right. And all they wanted from me was to stay sober and be a mother to my children and a wife to their son, And so I'm able to suit up and show up for them. Suit up and show up for those kids and my husband, and we just went to Mexico for 2 weeks. It was fabulous. I loved it down there. In fact, I want to have a boat sitting in some marina down there. Long way off, but all things are possible. All things. I guess my final message to you here is in Alcoholics Anonymous is that all things can get made right. All things can be made right here in Alcoholics Anonymous if we stay close to God, and and I do my best to live the principles of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous one day at a time. And so I've got the principles, I've got God, I've got wonderful sponsor, I've got fabulous women in my life that I love dearly. And, you know, they've been there for me through, you know, all the stuff in sobriety, you know, near divorce in sobriety. I almost got there in sobriety, too. You know, children doing what children do, and, you know, births and deaths and weddings and funerals, and, you know, we've gotten through all of it together, and we love one another with all the bumps and warts. And that's wonderful. It's wonderful to be able to be who you are and be okay. And I was never okay with who I was until I was about 45 years old. You know, and now I'm pretty okay with who I am, and I love my sober life. And I'd like to just close by my sponsor tells a wonderful story, and I'd love to tell you that about a little boy who wants so desperately to play with his father, and his father is way too busy and keeps shut, you know, so he tears this map of the world in, you know, hundreds and hundreds of pieces. And he says, "Kid, go to the room and put that map of the world together, and then I can play with you." The kid goes to his room, and he puts the sheet of paper together, and he comes back in about 10 minutes. He says, "Dad, I've got it put together." He says, "It's impossible. You couldn't do that. It was a map of the world." And he says, "Yes, but on the other side, but there was a map of a man, and there was a picture of a man, and when I put the man together, my world fell in place." That's been my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. You put me together as a woman, and as a result, the rest of my world has fallen together miraculously. It seems to be okay. You know, it isn't perfect by any means. I do not want to leave you with an illusion that my life is perfect. I've got kids who don't do what I want them to do, and I've got a husband that doesn't do what I want him to do, and, you know, people in my life who don't seem to do what I need to do, but, you know, it's okay. It's okay. My sponsor is a wonderful black belt, Al-Anon, and she taught me a wonderful tool. Don't ask the W's. Who, what, where, when, and why. Just avoid them. Because this is what happens. You either know the answer or you're not going to like the one you get. So it's a wonderful tool. People ask, I have Paula, she says to me all the time, who, what, where, what? I said, "Paula, I don't ask those questions." She goes, "How do you not ask those questions?" It just makes my life easier. You know, I don't have to know, what are you doing with your money? How are you getting to work? What, blah, you know, all that stuff. All I need to know is, you know, what I'm doing with my money, how I get, you know, suit up, what am I doing? I figured out it takes me all day to get me through all day. And it's pretty busy. It's a pretty busy day. And I just stay away from what they do and try to be, you know, an example of what you've taught me here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's, you know, to be of service wherever possible. So thank you all for listening, and thanks again, Justin.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.